On the 29th of May 2026, Justice Elfrida Oluwayemisi Williams Dawodu of the Court of Appeal, sitting in Port Harcourt, delivered a judgment that most Nigerians reading the headlines did not understand, and that Wike is hoping they never will. The court upheld the nullification of the congresses that produced Chief Tony Okocha as chairman of the APC in Rivers State. That sounds like a party administration matter. It is not, because Tony Okocha's chairmanship was the legal foundation upon which the APC primaries of May 21st were conducted. Those primaries produced one candidate for governor of Rivers State, Kingsley Chinda, Wike's man. It also produced dozens of candidates for the National Assembly and the State House of Assembly, Wike's allies across the board. The official position from Abuja is simple. Wait for INEC to publish its final list of candidates in July. That is what Wike said publicly on June 5th. Patient, unbothered, in control. But the documents say something the minister is not saying. If the congresses were null and void, and two courts have now said they were, then every nomination, every primary, every candidate list produced under that leadership structure between December 20th, 2024 and May 29th, 2026 carries the same legal contamination. That is not analysis. That is the exact language of the Court of Appeal judgment itself. Here is the question this investigation will answer. The man who spent 3 years engineering a political monopoly in Rivers State may have built it on a foundation that two courts have now told him cannot stand. When a minister of the federal government uses the instruments of federal office to control the outcome of a state election, and the courts begin systematically dismantling the legal architecture of that control, what you are witnessing is not a political dispute. You are witnessing the moment a captured institution begins to fight back. What I am about to show you has been assembled from court judgments, party documents, constitutional provisions, and a pattern of decisions that only becomes visible when you lay them end to end. This channel exists for exactly this kind of work, and the investigation that follows this one will trace a name that keeps appearing in the financial architecture of the FCT contract awards, a name that connects this Rivers political operation to something much larger. If you are watching this and you are not yet subscribed, the next investigation is the reason to change that right now. The subject of this video is counting on most Nigerians never connecting these dots. Subscribe and stay. Let us establish exactly what happened and precisely why it happened now. On May 21st, 2026, the APC conducted its governorship primary in Rivers State. One man emerged as the sole candidate, Kingsley Chinda, current minority leader of the House of Representatives and a non-ally of FCT Minister Nyesom Wike. The sitting governor, Siminalayi Fubara, who had defected to the APC in December 2025 and collected a nomination form, withdrew from the race hours before the primary was held. The surface narrative pushed by the political establishment is that this was a peace settlement. Fubara stepped aside voluntarily in the interest of party unity, honoring an agreement brokered by President Tinubu during the reconciliation process that ended the impeachment threat against him. Wike himself said it plainly on May 25th. Agreement was made that the impeachment should be dropped, while he should also not go about a second term. A peace deal. Two men reconciling, the president as peacemaker. That is the official story. Here is what the official story does not explain. It does not explain why Fubara defected to the APC only to be barred from its primary. It does not explain why Wike, a federal minister constitutionally charged with managing the Federal Capital Territory, is simultaneously the acknowledged power broker who decides who becomes governor of Rivers State. And it does not explain why, as one analyst at Blueprint Newspapers noted in May 2026, there is still no word in the political lexicon for what Wike has become. The de jure national leader of the opposition PDP and the de facto leader of the ruling APC in Rivers State. at the same time. The historical parallel is not subtle. In 2003, the same Rivers State produced a governor through the same mechanism: a sitting powerful figure, a hand-picked successor, a primary that produced a single candidate, and a peace framing designed to make coercion look like consensus. The name then was Peter Odili. The mechanism was identical. The only thing that has changed is that the powerful figure now runs a federal ministry from Abuja, while simultaneously operating the levers of a state political machine 600 kilometers away. Now, here is the fact that reframes everything. The primary that produced Chinda on May 21st was conducted under the leadership of Tony Okocha's APC executive. On May 29th, 8 days later, the Court of Appeal upheld the nullification of the congresses that produced that executive. The reinstated faction led by Emeka Beke promptly declared that all nominations, representations, and decisions made under the Okocha structure between December 20, 2024 and May 29, 2026 were, in their words, illegal, null, void, and of no effect. The source is the Court of Appeal. The implication is that Kingsley Chinda may not be a valid APC governorship candidate at all. This is not a party squabble. This is the legal infrastructure of an entire political operation beginning to fracture, and the fracture is happening at exactly the moment it matters most. The structural concealment at the center of this story is not about who becomes governor of Rivers State. It is about whether a serving federal minister can use federal office as the operational base for a state political machine, and whether the Nigerian constitution, applied honestly, permits that. To understand the scale of what Wike has built and the scale of what is now at risk, you have to look at the institutional architecture, not just the personalities. Start with the constitutional ambiguity that makes this entire structure possible. Section 148 of the 1999 Constitution gives the President discretion to assign responsibilities to ministers. What it does not do is bar a minister from engaging in partisan political activity in a state other than the FCT. The FCT Minister Act gives Wike extensive executive authority over Nigeria's capital, including control over land allocation, contract awards, and the administration of a territory that receives direct federal funding. None of that authority is formally restricted by any provision that says you cannot simultaneously operate a political machine in Rivers State. That ambiguity is not an accident. It is the gap through which Wike has driven an entire political operation. Who benefits from the ambiguity not being resolved? The answer is the same man who has exploited it more completely than any minister in the FCT's history.
Now follow the power. What has Wike actually built in Rivers State, and what does controlling it mean? He has constructed what political actors there are now calling the Rainbow Coalition, a cross-party structure spanning PDP, APC, Labour Party, and Action Alliance. When he addressed this coalition's luncheon in Port Harcourt on June 1, 2026, he said something that should have been the headline of every newspaper in this country. If you want to be governor, come here. If you want to be senator, come here. You must come. That is not the language of a federal minister commenting on state politics. That is the language of a feudal authority defining the terms of political survival in a territory he has claimed as his own. The 2027 calculation embedded in this structure is this: Wike does not need to hold any elected office in Rivers State. What he needs is a governor he controls. Chinda, and if not Chinda, Sam Ejeku, selected as the PDP consensus candidate from the Wike-aligned faction, gives him that. A Wike-controlled governor means continued control of the Rivers State House of Assembly, which Wike's allies have dominated since 2023. It means influence over the oil revenue streams flowing through the state. It means a political base that can deliver votes for Tinubu in 2027, which in turn means Wike retains his position in Abuja. The entire structure is self-reinforcing. Federal power protects state power. State power reinforces federal relevance. Who stands to lose? The calculation is clearer. an independent Fubara-aligned successor to the governorship, breaks this loop entirely. It means the Amawehule faction of the Rivers House of Assembly, Wike's legislative instrument, loses its patronage basis. It means the contract flows that have been directed towards politically aligned figures lose their guarantor. Rotimi Amechi, who has been backing the rival APC faction led by Emeke Beke, understands this. His survival in Rivers politics depends on the same structural collapse that the courts are now threatening. Now look at the money. The FCT's infrastructure budget runs into hundreds of billions of naira annually. The minister controls contract approvals directly. In January 2026, the FCDA briefed journalists after a Federal Executive Council meeting chaired by Wike on approvals including a 9.8 billion naira emergency road contract. This week, indigenous contractors in Abuja are publicly appealing to Wike to clear outstanding certified contracts executed under the National Shopping Procurement Framework, contracts they say were properly authorized, properly completed, and now inexplicably unpaid. The minister publicly disputed the basis of those contracts at his June 1st media chat. The financial architecture of the FCT is not incidental to this story. A minister who controls billions in contract awards, land allocations, and infrastructure spending in Nigeria's federal capital is not simply an administrator. He is a resource node, and resource nodes in Nigerian political architecture generate the loyalty flows that fund political operations in other states. One name keeps appearing across every layer of the Rivers political structure that Wike has built, and it is not Chinda and it is not Okocha. It belongs to the legal mechanism connecting the FCT contract framework to the political funding of the Rivers operation. We will get to exactly what that reveals before this investigation closes. The governing principle this layer reveals is this. In the Nigerian system, the combination of federal appointment and state political control is not a conflict of interest. It is a deliberate design feature, exploited by every administration since the Second Republic that the Constitution has never been forced to resolve. But here is what almost nobody has connected yet, and it changes the entire picture.
Wike is not just running a Rivers political operation from Abuja. He is running it through a party he is not even a registered member of. Wike is still formally a member of the PDP. He is the minister appointed by an APC president. He is simultaneously the acknowledged de facto leader of the Rivers APC. He attends APC candidate luncheons, he directs APC primaries, he determines who the APC endorses for governor. That means the legal exposure is not only in the courts, it is in the Electoral Act. Section 84 of the Electoral Act 2022 prohibits a political appointee from voting or participating in party primaries unless they resign their appointment. Wike has not resigned. The question of whether directing, not merely attending, but actively directing an APC primary while serving a PDP member and a federal minister constitutes participation in that primary is a question that has not yet been put to a court. But it is the kind of question that the Emeka Beke faction now has every incentive to put there. Step back from Rivers State for a moment and look at what this story actually does to Nigeria's federal architecture. The federal balance is the first casualty. Section 5 of the 1999 Constitution vests executive power in the president, exercisable through ministers. A minister who deploys that executive proximity, the access to the presidency, the control over federal funding, the informal weight of sitting across the table from Aso Rock to capture a state's political machinery is not a constitutional anomaly. He is a demonstration of what the Constitution's silence on ministerial political conduct actually permits. If Wike succeeds fully, if Chinda survives the legal challenge, wins the 2027 election, and the Rainbow Coalition delivers Rivers State, the template will be replicated. Every minister from a politically contested state will have a precedent. The FCT is just the most visible version of something that is happening in quieter ways across multiple ministries. The economic consequences for ordinary Rivers people are more immediate. Rivers State has the highest oil production of any state in the federation. It receives among the highest FAAC allocations.
Yet the political crisis between Wike and Fubara, orchestrated from Abuja, not from Port Harcourt, produced a Supreme Court judgment in February 2026 that froze the state's statutory allocations. The central bank was directed to withhold Rivers State funds until the governor presented the appropriation bill to the Amewile-led assembly. Residents of Rivers State could not access their own state's constitutionally guaranteed revenue because one man in Abuja controlled the legislative machinery needed to release it. The specific exposure, road infrastructure, school funding, health facility maintenance, all held hostage to a political dispute manufactured and sustained from a federal ministry. The security dimension is the one the headlines have consistently refused to name directly. APC leaders in May 2026 filed a petition demanding Wike's removal as minister, citing his statement that nobody can enter Rivers State. That statement, attributed to Wike in multiple documented reports, is not rhetorical. Rivers State has a documented history of political violence correlating with election cycles. Militant activity, according to analysts at the Center for Democracy and Development, resurfaced following the Rivers state of emergency in early 2025. When a serving minister signals that territorial political control is absolute and entry is conditional, he is not speaking metaphorically, he is speaking to an audience that understands exactly what that kind of language has meant in the Niger Delta since the 1990s.
Now, here is the name and mechanism flagged in the power analysis, returned to with full clarity. Tony Okocha is not merely a party chairman. He is the legal keystone of the entire Wike APC structure in Rivers State. His congresses produced the executive, his executive conducted the primaries, his primaries produced Chaideko and every other Wike-aligned candidate on the 2027 ballot. The Court of Appeal has now upheld the judgment nullifying those congresses. The mechanism connecting the FCT ministerial operation to the Rivers State electoral structure runs directly through Okocha, and Okocha's legal standing has been demolished at 2 court levels. When Wike says, "Wait for INEC's July list," what he is actually saying is, "I am betting that INEC accepts the submissions made under an executive structure that 2 courts have declared invalid." That is not confidence, that is a legal gamble on institutional inertia. The governing principle this national picture reveals is one that every Nigerian should hold. Federal appointments in Nigeria are not merely administrative positions, they are platforms for the accumulation of political capital that the appointing authority then borrows against, and the appointed figure exploits for purposes the Constitution never addressed because it was never designed. The strongest case for Wike's position is not difficult to construct, and it deserves full consideration before it is addressed. The argument runs as follows. Every Nigerian minister engages in the politics of their home state. Tony Okocha himself was Lagos governor for 8 years and the acknowledged godfather of Lagos politics long after he left Government House. Rotimi Amechi ran the Governors Forum from Rivers. Atiku Abubakar ran Adamawa. Political godfatherism is not a constitutional violation, it is a feature of Nigerian democracy that the Constitution, for better or worse, tolerates. Wike is doing nothing that his predecessors did not do. The court nullifying the Okocha-led APC executive is a party internal matter. INEC has its own regulatory process, and candidates whose nominations are submitted by a recognized national party structure may well survive judicial challenges to state executive congresses. Wike's instruction to wait for INEC's July list is not bluster, it is the legally accurate observation that what matters for candidacy is INEC's recognition, not a factional court ruling at the state level. That argument has genuine weight, and this channel will not dismiss it. Here is the evidence that cuts against this video's own thesis. The APC national leadership has consistently recognized the Okocha faction as the legitimate Rivers State chapter throughout this entire dispute. When APC National backs a structure, INEC has historically followed that recognition over state court judgments in party internal matters. There are precedents from Zamfara, Anambra, and Imo where candidates produced by court-challenged structures survived because the national party's submission to INEC was accepted. If that institutional pattern holds, and it might, Chideco stays on the ballot and the legal trap this video has described never closes. That is an honest concession. This analysis has examined it. Here is why the overall argument holds despite it.
The Zamfara and Imo precedents involved courts challenging internal party congresses after candidates were already on the ballot. The Rivers situation is structurally different. The challenge to Okocha's leadership predates the primaries. Justice Obomanu's High Court ruling nullifying the congresses was delivered on December 20, 2024, 5 months before the May 21 primaries were held. The Chinda primary was conducted under a structure a court had already declared invalid. That is not the same as a post-primary challenge. It is a pre-existing legal defect that the primaries themselves inherited. The key misconception most Nigerians hold about this story is that it is about Fubara versus Wike or Ijo versus Ikwere. It is neither. It is about whether a serving minister can use his federal office as a permanent political operations center for a state he no longer governs, and whether the legal system applied consistently will eventually say no. The ethnicity framing is the distraction. The institutional question is the substance. You have just heard the strongest case for Wike, and you have heard the evidence that challenges it. Now I want your verdict in the comments right now. Here is the binary. Either INEC's July list absorbs the court rulings and Chinda stays on the ballot, meaning the Nigerian political machine has once again swallowed a legal challenge whole, or the court's decisions cascade forward and Wike's entire 2027 architecture in Rivers State collapses before a single vote is cast. Both outcomes are defensible. Neither is certain. Tell me which version you believe and why. And if this level of analysis is what you think Nigerian political coverage should look like, hit the like button, not for this channel, as your signal to the algorithm that Nigerians are demanding exactly this. The investigation continues. 3 most likely next moves from the key actors grounded in established pattern. First, Wike will do exactly what he said he would do, wait for INEC. He will use the interval between now and the July publication date to pressure the INEC national leadership to formally resubmit or reaffirm Chinda's candidacy under a clean party structure, bypassing the Okocha question entirely through a fresh administrative process. His leverage with Abuja, which is substantial given the role he played in Tinubu's 2023 victory, is the instrument here. Watch for any APC National Working Committee communique between now and July that reaffirms the Rivers State candidate list. That communique is the rescue mechanism. Second, the Emeka Beke faction will not wait for INEC. Having won at both the High Court and the Court of Appeal, they now have standing to file for a pre-election injunction at the Federal High Court in Abuja, seeking an order restraining INEC from accepting any candidacy arising from the nullified primaries. The timing of any such application will be the critical signal. If it is filed before July, it forces INEC into a judicial bind that Wike's national-level lobbying may not be able to resolve informally. Third, Fubara is not finished. His withdrawal from the APC primary was, as analysts at City People documented in detail, coerced under threat of immediate impeachment. A sitting governor who has been forced to surrender his re-election ambition does not dissolve his political network. He waits. If the Beke faction's legal challenge succeeds and the Chinda candidacy is removed, there is a specific window between the nullification of Chinda's ticket and the closing of INEC's substitution window in which a new candidate aligned with Fubara could enter the APC race. That window is narrow, but it exists, and Fubara knows exactly where it is.
The signals to watch in the coming weeks are specific. Any federal high court filing from the Bedike faction before July 15th means the legal route is active. Any public statement from APC National Secretary Ajibola Basiru on the validity of Rivers State's candidate list is a confirmation of which way the National Party is leaning. And watch INEC's own register of parties. If it lists a Rivers APC chairperson other than Okocha in its internal records, the submission battle has already been settled without a court order. Now, the question this investigation opened with. Wike controls both the PDP and the APC machinery in Rivers State simultaneously. But if the judicial ground beneath the APC structure collapses before July, what does he have left? Here is the full answer. He still has the PDP. Sam Ejeku, the Wike-aligned PDP consensus candidate, emerged from a separate process under the national PDP structure that INEC formally recognizes. The Umar Damagum/Sheriff Oburewori-aligned PDP that Wike's faction won control of at the March 2026 National Convention. That candidacy is not contaminated by the Okocha judgment. The APC collapse, if it comes, does not leave Wike with nothing. It leaves him with a PDP candidate and the cross-party rainbow coalition he has been building precisely as an insurance structure. What Wike cannot survive is this: both judicial routes closing simultaneously, the APC candidacy voided and the PDP faction's legitimacy challenged at the Supreme Court level in the Tanimu Turaki appeal. That is the double lock scenario, and the Turaki appeal as of June 6, 2026 remains pending at the Supreme Court. In 5 years, if this trajectory holds, Nigeria ends up with a governance model where federal ministries are permanently dual use, public administration on paper, state political operations in practice. The FTT becomes not an anomaly, but a template. Every minister from a contested state treats their federal brief as the funding and operational base for perpetual local control. The electoral system produces candidates whose legitimacy rests not on democratic mandate, but on which judicial ruling arrived last before the INEC deadline. Rivers State's enormous oil revenue continues to be instrumentalized for political combat in Abuja rather than invested in the state it comes from. That is not a warning. That is the specific institutional consequence of the pattern this story belongs to. The final question for the comments is this one. If the Nigerian constitution does not prohibit a serving minister from simultaneously directing the political fate of his home state, should it? And if it should, why has no National Assembly since 1999 ever put that provision on the floor? You now know something that the average Nigerian watching the evening news tonight does not know. They know that Fubara stepped aside, they know that Chide Soro emerged, and they know there is a court case. But what they do not know is that the legal structure producing Wike's candidate was already declared void before the candidate was produced. They do not know that the same man holds formal leadership of the opposition party and informal control of the ruling party in the same state at the same time from a federal ministry in Abuja. You know all of it now. Every detail, every name, every mechanism. There is a Nigerian somewhere watching this political crisis play out, reading headlines, hearing commentary, getting fragments without the full picture. The share button is how this reaches them, not as a favor to this channel, as the action of someone who now carries information that most people around them don't have. The thread this investigation has opened but not yet resolved is the financial one, the specific contracting relationships connecting the FTT's infrastructure awards to the political operation being run from inside it. That investigation is already underway. The names are on the documents exist. I'm Naija Unmasked. The mask has come off. We continue.